You see, the land of Israel was completely desolate. There was nothing there except for a few isolated farm areas. The whole area of Israel was sparsely populated. There were hardly any people there. It was desert, marshes, bogs, harsh areas where nobody wanted to live. Suddenly in the 18th century, and a little time before, the 15th, 16th, and 17th century for some, but in the 18th century, Jews from Europe started coming back to the land of Israel, settling in Jerusalem. Eventually, there became a Zionist movement in the 19th century, and more Jews came back to their holy land. When there are people coming and they're starting settlements, there are jobs. As a result of the job demand, many Arabs from places like Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, even from places in the Arabian Peninsula, came to what was then called Palestine to get jobs. That's where you get the so-called Palestinian people. 90% of them are descendants of Arabs from other lands. This has been established without any question as a fact. Then, once the Jews started demanding their own independence, that's when the Arabs started fighting against the Jews and attacking them. In response, Jews developed a system of protection which eventually was called the Haganah. Haganah means protection. It's not a violent military, it's a protector of the Jewish establishment, the Jewish villages and the Jewish farmlands and so on. And the Arabs resorted to pogroms, just like Christian brothers in the north. There was a pogrom in Hebron, and as a result of that, the Jews were driven out of Hebron, even despite the fact that they owned many of the houses, a large percentage of the houses in Hebron. Many of the houses that the so-called Palestinians live in today are houses that belonged to Jews in 1929. The so-called Arab Quarter in East Jerusalem was populated by Jews. It was called the Arab Quarter after 1936 by the British government, trying to make the old city of Jerusalem part Arab, part Jewish, part Armenian. The truth is that 66%, almost exactly two-thirds, of the people living in Jerusalem prior to 1948 were Jewish. This is not known by people out there because the media calls the old city Arab East Jerusalem, which is a lie. East Jerusalem, the old city, was primarily a Jewish city. There were about 15 to 20% Arabs and 15% or so Armenians or Christians who lived in the old city. The Jews owned some of the houses, rented from some of the houses, but they were the primary residents of the city. So who should get the old city of Jerusalem after 1948, after 1967? Not the Arabs, they were the minority. But your media has accepted the big lie that this is Arab East Jerusalem, when it's a complete lie. Yes, they chased the Jews out, and during the period between 1948 and 1967, there were no Jews living there. Just as there would be no Jews living in the so-called Palestinian areas in Judea and Samaria. Now, Judea comes from the tribe of Judah. Judea, that's where Jews lived. Why should Judea be Judenrein or Samaria, which was the capital of the northern kingdom, Shomron? Ask yourself, if London had been captured by the Germans, would it still not be an English city? Would the English not want to return there as the French returned to Paris? Jerusalem was always the capital of Israel. There are hundreds, almost 1,000 references to Jerusalem in the Jewish Bible. No references to Jerusalem are found in the Quran. The reason why the Muslims want to hold on to it, because that's very convenient. If you are dominating the holy place of the parent religion, then that bolsters your desire to be the heir, the religious heir of that religion. So they want to control Jerusalem because it bolsters their false image that they have inherited God, the Jewish God, from the Jews and the Christians. And of course, that's false. It's nonsense. The Jewish God never talked to them, never had any covenant with them, but there was a man who wanted to believe in the Jewish God because he was the one God. So he called him Allah. Allah is the same word as Elohim in Hebrew. Eloah is a name of God, which we direct to the Supreme Being. And so the word means God. That's the Jewish God. It's the universal God, the God of all, the creator of the universe. The Creator never made a covenant with the Arabs, as he did with the people of Israel. In fact, the Creator never made a covenant with the Christians, as he did with Israel. One person comes along and says he wants to change that, or several people. But nobody saw God come down on a mountain and talk to them. All of the reports were seen by very few people, certainly not an entire community, an entire nation. And that's the difference between the Jews and others. But what I want to say is, we've begun to see the light. The lie that the anti-Semites wish to perpetrate, the lie that Andropov started, taken by the media, ABC, NBC, CBS, has now been formally denied by the Canadian government. And the report of a KGB agent is only the beginning of the end of this great lie. Israel belongs to the Jews. The Jews have a right to exist and are not violent. On the contrary, we've been the victims of violence throughout the centuries. It's enough. No more violence. It's a time for peace based upon truth and understanding. Not yelling, not hatred, not killing. Peace in this year.